George Balekji. She's Annabelle Hasselbeck. We're in the PNC Bank studio. AB, what's up? 2 days in a row with you in the studio. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I feel lucky. This is awesome.
Should we just start right off the rip? How did that poll on the Oreo come
I know
out?
you wanted to do this, so we're going to do it. I'm going to pull up my Instagram.
I just feel vindicated.
Yep.
I feel validated.
All right,
I
it's
feel
okay.
seen.
Listen,
I feel
I put it up for a
heard.
reason. I felt confident that I could do that. So we put up the poll about the Oreo. Is an Oreo a cookie or not? And I believe that an Oreo is not labeled as a cookie. I just never would think Oreo cookie in my head. I just think of its own thing. You think it's a cookie, and you might be right in the sense of my Instagram friends, 60 to 40%, basically even.
Well, no, 55-45 is basically 60-40.
Okay, 60-40 isn't basically
won.
even. You did clearly win as of, I don't even know what hour is this, hour 3 of
the
it being
poll?
up, okay?
Okay.
And I would say I know who my real friends are. That's the only thing I have to say there. But you got 76 votes, okay?
And 60% of them say an Oreo is a cookie.
True.
I would say you should feel good about 40% though. If it was like 12% agreed with you, then you'd be like, okay. At least 40%. If you're
close.
You're at a party, 40% of the people will agree with you. That's not bad.
It's not 70-30. That would be bad. That would be a clear L. But here we still have time left. What, like couple 20-something hours-ish, 21 hours. So
go follow AB on Instagram and vote in her poll. But after you follow AB on Instagram, vote Oreo is a cookie. Then follow me on Instagram.
How about just listen to the conversation and choose your own? Choose what you want from the poll.
Hey, this is the 100th episode of the chat. I just love the start we're off to.
Great.
Like
I didn't know that. This is a big deal. Thanks
again,
for having me.
I love that you're here. And like, this is what we're starting with. We're educating the people. And once again, I like that we're starting with my favorite cookie, the Oreo that we're talking about. A cookie.
Well, when you get your Oreo deal,
I'll remember you.
thank you.
Free double stuffed. You double stuffed?
Sure.
You always got to go double stuff over the regular. I'll send them your way. All right, we'll get into what's trending. This hurt me. I'm happy to see the Pac-12 is back, but it's also a reminder it never should have went away. The Pac-12 is officially adding Boise State, Colorado State, San Diego State, and Fresno State in 2026, a conference announced. I loved Pac-12 football. I love Pac-12 sports. They should have never left. It's coming back, so I got to be somewhat happy, but it's just not the same. But I like these additions: Boise, Colorado State, SDSU, and Fresno.
Yeah, it's crazy, and this might be a big move today, but that does not mean that it's going to be the only move that we're going to see. This college conference landscape is continually changing, really because of the TV money and football, right?
Yeah.
But I think something that not a lot of people are talking about is how is this affecting the Olympic sport athletes, right? The Pac-12 is pretty much okay. They're pretty in a geographical similar area, these schools that we just listed, Boise State, Colorado State. However, think about schools like Stanford, now in the ACC.
Yep.
My sister Mallory plays for Boston College, and now these schools are going to be playing each other. And you're talking soccer, field hockey, basketball, softball. These are teams that are playing multiple games in a week, not just football, 6 away games maybe, right? So obviously football is where the money is. That's where these changes are being made. But I think it's something to be thinking about because as a student, you go to school, student athlete, you go to school.
Yeah.
So like, what about school?
Yeah. And like you said, if you're a softball player making that West Coast swing out to Stanford, or the reverse for Stanford, come out to the East Coast because it's them and Cal, and that's it. And everyone else is on the East Coast for the most part. Like, those are longer road trips. They're trying to balance homework, studying, actually being a good athlete and playing too. I agree. I went to Seton Hall, grew up a diehard Big East fan. I loved it when Syracuse and BC were in the Big East. But like you said, football. And when Rutgers was there too, now it's in the Big Ten. But football ruined the best basketball conference, in my opinion, in college basketball because they wanted BC. And I get it. Go to the ACC along with Q's and then for Rutgers to leave altogether. And even to the point when like Miami was in the Big East. But that was like fun to see. But it is like football drives all these changes. We'll see who else is added because right now the Pac-12 is Boise, Colorado State, SDSU, Fresno, and then Oregon State and Washington State. So it's at 6 teams. The Pac-12 with 6 teams. We'll see if the Pac-12 gets back to 12 teams at least. But
And even rivalry games, like those are now blown out soon. So it is crazy. There's a lot to change, but I think that it's still going to be changing. Obviously, this is how college works. This is how the NCAA is working. And it's really showing us that this isn't amateur sports anymore, especially with the money coming in with NIL and football. This is professional sports in an amateur environment. And that's really what's driving it. And yes, I do think that student athletes should be rewarded in certain ways because of how much money is being made. But it is crazy. It is changing, and we'll see how it goes.
Who's BC's biggest rival?
Right now?
Yeah, let's go right now.
Northwestern.
Oh. Now, what about like overtime? Would you say is like a Notre
Overtime,
Dame?
I mean, BC's okay. Well, what sport are we talking about?
Let's go.
So I just went for the lacrosse answer. BC's biggest rival would be Northwestern.
Okay.
But I would say overall as a school, Notre Dame.
Okay.
We're very similar schools.
Yeah.
When we have the Holy War, it's a thing no matter what sport you're playing. On campus is crazy. But hey, right now Missouri, that's our biggest rival.
Of the week.
BC football is playing Missouri down there, so that's our biggest rivalry right now.
Excited for that Saturday. Reminder, check out past episodes. Last episode of the chat, Drew Kendall, Jr., starting center for BC football, was on it. Head over to our YouTube page to check out the interview. He was great. Best of luck to them as they face Missouri. Top 25 ranked matchup on the road in Columbus, 12:45 kickoff. I'm hyped for that. All right, talking about the Patriots facing the Seahawks this Sunday. Patriots Twitter, check out this video that they put out hinting at a little change to the jerseys. They put out something of nothing like going through the Patriots Pro Shop. You got to pick your t-shirt. In this case, you got to pick your stuffed animal. AB, they grabbed the silver pants. As someone that hates the blueberries that the Patriots wear every home game, I'm excited. I don't like their jerseys. I'm excited at least they're going silver pants.
I've never heard that. Is that like a normal term, the blueberries for Patriots uniforms?
I wouldn't say I'm the first, but they wear all blue. It's just a big blueberry. I wouldn't say
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. You know, I do like kind of that monochromatic look, but I love the iconic look. I love the silver pants. If it's something that people will buy, let's do it. Like if you're willing to wear it around, awesome. Yeah. Something that I would not be willing to wear around, the New York Giants throwback jerseys that we saw in week 1, those are hideous. Those are bad. So maybe we'll just stick to like the last 20 to 30 years of throwbacks, but Patriots looking a lot better in the pro shop.
Yeah, those with like the khaki pants, like I get it. You want to like, honor, just don't do the khaki pants. Like modernize a little more. The Seahawks week 1 jerseys are some of my favorite in football. Were those the 90s? They wore those in the... It was like Steve Largent days.
Yes, those were awesome. They got the royal blue, silver helmets.
I like that shade of blue. That's what it's
it's kind of like this shade of blue. I actually bought this shirt thinking of the Seahawks retro jerseys, but like in Seattle, just walking around there this summer, those jerseys, that logo, it says it's a different logo as well. It's being sold everywhere in the city, and people are wearing it. People were wearing more of that jersey that I saw than the normal jersey. So,
not surprised. You
know what? If people are going to wear it, let's do it, and they look good.
I think I like those jerseys. Those I've seen, the Kelly Green throwback Philadelphia Eagles jerseys, like a Jalen Hurts one, that's clean. Chargers, any version I like too, but the Seahawks throwbacks, they did it right. I said it time and time again, the Patriots should bring back their 90s throwback. Same thing, a blue similar to that, big Elvis patch on the shoulder, like the Ty Law days, bring those jerseys back because I think that's better than what they have right now.
It's exciting. I like the change up, and it's good for the NFL.
Oh yeah.
It brings more attention to the NFL, and they're letting teams wear these throwback jerseys just twice during the season.
Yep.
That's like their new rule. So very interesting for a lot of teams to pull it out week 1.
I know. But Seahawks pulled it out week 1. They got the win, so at least you win when you're looking good. All right, speaking about the Patriots, you see that ESPN report that came out? So Don Van Natta put together a really long excerpt. So it's like 3,000 words. Or if you check it out, ESPN also has a podcast, but stick here. But they have a podcast where they can summarize the article in about 30 minutes. Basically, it's Robert Kraft's quest to get into the Hall of Fame. And I'll start with a quick excerpt from Don Van Natta's article and his research. He said this: no current owner has tried harder to get into the Hall or been denied longer. Beginning in 2012, Kraft supporters have lobbied Hall voters on his behalf. Eddie Bartolo Jr., former San Francisco 49ers owner, was inducted in 2016 despite losing his team in 2000s because of his connection to an extortion case. He has 5 Lombardi trophies. Kraft at the time had 4. Of course, now he has 6. But then it gets into Jerry Jones's, and that's what stuck out to me, Annabelle. Jerry Jones was inducted in August 2017. Back in Foxborough, Kraft and his supporters reacted to Jones' induction with anger and confusion. They seized that Hall voters didn't seem to appreciate Kraft's work to grow the league through media and labor deals and the Patriots' unparalleled dynasty. And Kraft reportedly said, Jerry Jones hasn't been to an NFC title game in 2 decades and he gets in. How does that work? Basically, it is Robert Kraft is miffed he hasn't gotten in. Jerry Jones has gotten in. Robert Kraft wants to be in, will not openly say it, and he's making pushes, which I don't blame him. He's 83 years old. He's the most successful owner in the NFL with 6 Lombardi trophies. He kept the Patriots in New England, which I think was huge for the NFL, and he kept that relationship between Bill Belichick and Tom Brady intact. On top of, he ended the lockout in 2011. He helped sign and close a 10-year, $111 billion deal for streaming and rights, which is a lot of money for the owners. He's been so important to the growth and how big the NFL is. Then what they cite is Spygate, Deflategate, and even the allegations of the Orchids of Asia, what happened in Jupiter, Florida. I don't even want to get into that. That's weird. But it's basically saying these Hall voters hold that against them. Look, no NFL owner has a clean sheet. And if they want to bring up the Orchids of Asia, which to me is a complete farce of why they would not let him in, Jerry Jones, going through his resume, Cowboys have been 5-13 in the playoffs since 96. 2017, he threatened to bench players that knelt during the national anthem. He tried to get Roger Goodell fired after he suspended Ezekiel Elliott for domestic violence charges. In 2014, photos with strippers surfaced where Jerry Jones was groping one of them. In 2022, a $2.4 million confidential settlement paid to Cowboys cheerleaders after they accused a senior team executive of taking photos of them in the locker room. He was the VP of PR and Communications. And as of February 2023, Jerry Jones has 3 lawsuits active against him, including him sexually assaulting a woman in 2020 at AT&T Stadium. Jerry Jones is in. Robert Kraft should get in. This is a very long article. People are using these excuses, I think, just because they don't like Robert Kraft to get in. I don't care for owners to be in the Hall of Fame at all, AB. But if there's someone that should, as there have been owners, Robert Kraft should be in it. If not now, he should be in it yesterday.
That's exactly what it is. It's not an if, it's a when,
Yeah.
right, with him, but it's just jealousy.
Yep.
Like, you named all these accolades, all these amazing impacts that Robert Kraft has had, not even just for the Patriots, but for the NFL.
Yep.
And then when you compare it with Jerry Jones and then look at that situation, like, it's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
So all it can be attributed to is jealousy. And when you have success like he has with the New England Patriots, who, you know, if you're not a Patriots fan, you don't like the Patriots, that's the jealousy coming in. People don't want to see him in the Hall of Fame. And truthfully, what's that process like? It's not very transparent. These votes are anonymous. So we can see the bias here. He will get in the Hall of Fame one day. We just don't know when it will be.
They also mentioned, which jumped out to me, of Kraft's Dynasty book and Apple TV series Dynasty, were another push to get into the Hall. That's not what that was. Like, I mean, he's a smart businessman. You're going to write a book on how you built the most successful sports dynasty we've ever seen in modern day, and you're going to turn into an Apple TV Plus docuseries. And if you have an issue with how he handled that and how he had control over it and where it was a lot of blame putting on Bill Belichick, fine. Like, I agree with that. He would have done that anyway. If he was in the Hall of Fame back in 2018 or 2019 after they got their 6th Lombardi, or if he was in the Hall of Fame in 2023, right before it came out, that was coming out anyway. It's just finding all these excuses. You said it. There's jealousy in there. How successful they've been. Everyone hates the Cowboys. And like last I checked too.
Not if you're in Dallas.
Everyone's exactly.
Everyone
like here.
but people in Dallas, yeah.
And but like for them to hang Deflategate, Spygate, when there are plenty of owners through the eras of NFL that are in the Hall of Fame, and for them just to float out anything like that, you could have an issue with Robert Kraft, the person, maybe how he carries himself. Maybe you're just a hater because they're successful. But him as an owner, it's undisputed how positive his impact has been on the NFL and what it still is today. That's someone that should be in. They're just coming with all these excuses. It was interesting to read. And I would like to point this out too. Don Van Natta, really good journalist, really good writer at ESPN. Jerry Jones doesn't like Robert Kraft. There was a report that came out a few years ago at an owners meeting where Jerry said to Kraft, like, don't F with me. And Robert Kraft's like, what? And he's verbatim, he said the 4-letter word, don't F with me. I could be any more clear. Don Van Natta is writing Jerry Jones's autobiography. So like we know where this is coming from. So that's where it's just like, they put out this long thing. They named Stacey James, who's the head of PR for the Patriots. Yeah, Stacey could be intense, but he gets his job done. And then how he's lobbying for Robert Kraft, he's doing his job. Like, Robert Kraft is his boss, and Stacey James has been with New England since Robert Kraft bought the team. Like, can you blame him for wanting to push for his guy to get in? But the way they name him, saying he's just Stacey James, he's just doing his job. Like, it was just a weird article to me. And we keep boiling it down to Robert Kraft will be in the Hall of Fame one day. For it to be made this big of a deal, I understand why it's a big deal. He hasn't been voted in or let alone been a finalist. But for it to be this big of a deal of everything he's doing, he's going to get in. Like, it's all BS to me.
Yeah, the excuses don't even have anywhere to land, just like you said, because you could look at the Hall of Fame and you could probably have the similar or different excuses for a lot of people in there as well, right? Mm-hmm. So the scandals you want to bring up, there's really no hard argument for that at all here.
It's another part they put in. Getting Kraft into Canton first occurred to James after watching his boss play peacemaker during the contentious 2011 clockout of the players by the owners. When a CBA agreement was finally struck that saved the season, Kraft famously hugged Colts center and players union leader Jeff Saturday, who declared, "This doesn't get done without Robert Kraft." Like, that alone, like, you got back to football on top of the money he made them. It's someone, obviously, he's polarizing around the league. People get tired of seeing teams win. For it to go this long, and it's just interesting, like ESPN always puts out these bombshells. It feels like once a year. It's Seth Wickersham, it's Don Van Natta on the Patriots. It's the influence that someone like Jerry Jones has over the Hall of Fame voters, and that's trickling down into this, I feel like.
You're right. It's who the voters are, and that's not something that we're really hearing, right? Yeah. No one's really talking about it, and that's why it's a little sus. It's why it's not very transparent. So he will get in the Hall of Fame someday. There's serious bias, serious jealousy coming up against him. But, yeah, I mean, he's doing his part. Like you said, your PR guys are doing their job, and that's what we've been saying with the Patriots for years now. So just keep doing your job. It's going to come.
Yeah, and again, for Stacey James, someone I've worked with, he's always treated me well, and he'll say no to me. Like, there wasn't special treatment, but he'd treat me like professionally and with respect. He's doing his job the one way or the next, and he's been there since '93. I hate seeing Stacey James's name dropped in this so many times, and I'm going to say it a bunch, because that's someone that doesn't deserve to even be caught up in this stuff. You want to write about Robert Kraft, that's fine. You want to write about Jerry Jones, that's fine. But someone that's just doing their job and listening to their boss, like, it goes by this. And also what's held up is he hasn't gotten to the Hall. Even the subcommittee hasn't forwarded his name for consideration. The process is in November, they vote on 25 semifinalists. In December, 15 finalists. And then before the Super Bowl, out of 15 finalists, to get in, you need to get 40% of the vote out of 50 people. So 40 or 50 people have to vote you in. He has not even gotten to the part where his name is up in November to be a semifinalist. So a lot of question marks. It was interesting write-up by ESPN. 6 Super Bowls, won 10 AFC Championship game appearances, 2011 lockout, the streaming and TV deals that he's brokered, and just keeping, again, the Patriots in New England when they could have left. And he also built up Patriot Place to what it is. He was ahead of his time of taking a stadium and building a campus there, now that we're seeing everywhere, including Dallas with Jerry Jones.
Yeah, he took this organization from being mediocre, right, and to just one of the best sports organizations in the world. So there is no reason for anyone to blink an eye about it.
Yeah.
And when you're at the top, like you said earlier, when you're at the top and you're winning, anyone will look for anything, even if it's an excuse that makes no sense for someone just doing their job, hyping their boss up. Oh, that's invalid, right? So anyone will take anything when you're winning and you're at the top, and nobody thought they were going to beat the Bengals. Nobody thought that they were going to beat the Bengals. And then here he is in the locker room shouting the team out in that intimate setting. It was hard. I have never been in that locker room, and I was like, oh, I'm getting kind of emotional. This is a cool moment for the Patriots, right? Yep. So they've been on the top. They probably will be back at the top, and they're just looking to knock them down.
Yeah. Speaking of Hall of Fame, we caught up with Hall of Famer Walter Jones, a friend of AB. I texted Annabelle. I was like, hey, if you know anyone Seahawks you can get? She's like, I think we're going to have Walter Jones. And I was like, the Walter Jones? Hall of Famer, Seahawks legend, one of the best left tackles to ever play the game. Check it out right here. He's Pro Football Hall of Famer, Seahawks legend, one of the best left tackles to ever play the position. Walter Jones joining the chat. Walter, appreciate you taking the time, especially from the golf course, my man.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. It's an honor to be here, man. So I'm looking forward to it.
Walter, so we want to start off with, you're someone that's around the Seahawks facilities and the buildings and the team so much. What have been your early impressions of Mike Macdonald as he is into his first season leading that franchise?
I think he's doing a great thing. I think With his age, I think this is where the league is going. Everybody's trying to find the new thing. So I think with him, he's young. I think he understands what these guys want. You have to understand these younger kids, this younger generation, and I think he does a great job of that. And I think he's bringing his own what we call here, and I think guys are filling in. But after the first game, you kind of see that it's going to be all about defense, and that definitely was showing on Sunday.
Walter, from last week's game, some of the Patriots fans here out in New England are watching the Patriots play the Bengals. They probably didn't watch the Seahawks play the Broncos. What was your one takeaway for New England, people here in New England? What was your one takeaway for what they should know about that game?
I think you have to look at the way the defense played. I think the defense is going to come in there, and I think they say the best teams are the teams that can go on the road and play. You can bring your defense with you, and from what I saw last week, I think this defense is going to be pretty good on the road because these guys, especially in the secondary, it's all about those guys making tackles in the run game, and I thought those guys did a great job of that in the game where those guys was making support tackles and stuff like that. So you need that from that secondary. So for the New England Patriot guys, I think that they're going to see a great defense, a very young defense that's definitely still trying to figure it out, but shows some good stuff on Sunday, and hopefully they can show it again on this Sunday.
Yeah, we saw a lot of those guys in secondary. Devin Witherspoon, Justin Love coming up and making plays for Mike McDonald. But, Walter, what you have to love, I bet, about the Seahawks team is that Mike McDonald comes in, defensive mindset, and goes to his new OC, Ryan Grubb, and going, we're running the ball. What stands out to you about this offensive line as they're paving ways for Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet?
I think they're doing a great job. I think the game this week started a little slow, but I think everything got started there in the second half there where they kind of went into the no huddle. I think that the defense was kind of like confusing those guys. So I think a lot of times when you get to that point, what you have to do is kind of speed the tempo up. And once you do that, now you can kind of get the defense set. So once the defense got set, I thought that now they can start calling plays. And I think anytime you get Kenny Walker to keep him involved in the game, you're going to have success. And you saw that in the second half.
Yeah, K9 played so well. And he had that diving touchdown. And I think I was in the radio booth. We were all like, what? He could have hurt himself. He jumped so high. It was like a full-on dive into a pool, and there was no one around him. So love that guy. That was an awesome play. But want to hear a little bit more about your perspective on Geno Smith. What have you seen from him? What are you most impressed about? He did really juke out a defender to get that touchdown, which I think a lot of guys thought was awesome and just fun to watch him run. And I think he said, I ran like the wind in his press conference. It's like, yeah, man, you did. So what have you seen from Geno Smith?
I think he's a veteran, a leader. I think as a quarterback, you have to be that. You have to make sure you put everybody in the right place. And still, again, you have to make the plays when the plays are available. And I think with him showing his speed, showing that, hey, I do have wheels. I don't have to use them all the time. But when I get a chance to do it, he does a great job at it. And you saw that on that touchdown run, though. And I think he have to be the voice for this team right now. You have to be able to be the voice for the coach when you're on the football field, because when you're on that field, you're in control. So I think for him, I think he have to be the voice, and kind of saw that last week. And anytime you get a win, that's a positive, so you feel good going into the next week. So let's just see if we can keep this thing rolling.
Walter, how important is that for a guy like Geno Smith, a veteran that's been with Seattle since 2019, was a backup when he got here and been their guy now the last 3 seasons? But how important is that for a team that even wants to pride themselves on running the ball, and for offensive linemen like someone in your shoes to know you have someone under center and in the huddle that commands it and gets the respect from their teammates? What makes that so important in your eyes?
Oh, that's very important. I think the thing about it, though, is just always being a guy that controls it, that knows what's going on. I think for offensive linemen, I think it's all about making sure that everybody's on the same page. Because no matter if everybody mess up, it always falls down to the offensive lineman. So if you got a quarterback that understands everything that we're doing and what everybody else is doing, the running backs, the receivers, that makes it for a fun game. And you kind of saw that in the second half where he was in control. He was calling the plays that he liked and putting the ball where he needed to be at. But anytime, you can run the ball, especially for offensive linemen, that's what you want to do. You want to feel good. And I think with him, it's all about winning. I think all these guys are all about winning, whatever it takes. If it's a great running game or a good running game this week, next week will be a good passing game. I think Geno fits the bill on whatever they want him to do. If he want to throw the ball 30 times, he can do that. If he want to hand the ball off.
Walter, I have two questions for you. One, I noticed you have a ring on. Can we see your ring? That's our first question. The blue ring?
Yeah, this is my Hall of Fame ring. I think you guys can see it. Yeah, it's my Hall of Fame ring.
Nice.
So, now I get a chance for people to get out and see it. A lot of times you have it in your trophy case, and you really don't bring it out. It's kind of like Super Bowl rings. Guys don't bring them out, but when you're out here with fans and people that are back to the community, they get an opportunity to get close to it, kind of hold it and touch it and stuff like that. So anytime I get a chance to do that, I want people to get a chance to see it and be a part of it, take pictures of it, do what they need to do with it. So it's kind of fun.
It's super fun. Are you kidding me? If I had that, I'd be wearing it around every day too. But I love that. But like you said, you're with fans right now. You do a lot in the community. You have a clothing brand. What are you up to right now? What do you got going on?
Right now, like it started the season. Like I say, I do like you said that I do a post game show called The Fifth Quarter. I'm very into that. I love being part of that. You know what I'm saying? And getting a chance to talk to the guys and asking questions and stuff like that. Like I say, my clothing brand is all about being the best version of yourself. So anytime I wear it, I try to tell people to be the best version. When you step out, you always got to be the best version. So I always tell people to go check out the brand b2edi.com. Best to ever do it. I got hoodies, I got t-shirts, I got hats. So go check it out if it sparks with you about being the best version of yourself.
Hey, can't disagree with that at all. Best to ever do it. Walter Jones, Hall of Fame left tackle. Appreciate you taking the time, my man. One of the best to ever do it. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate your time.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Walter Jones, awesome human. You have any good stories from getting to know him?
Awesome human. Well, so nice of him to take the time to talk to us. He was on a golf cart at a golf course for a charity event, and he was kind of moving around. He showed his ring and the thing. I was like, wait, can you show the ring? He had his Hall of Fame ring on for us to see. So that was awesome. But speaking of golf, I was at a golf tournament with Walt earlier this summer. And some of those golf paths, they're really narrow and the hills can be really high. And so I'm on this golf cart with Walter Jones, a large man, okay? This guy is like solid rock. And we start going up this hill. And then I'm thinking in my head, I was on this earlier by myself and I was nervous. So now I'm on here with Walter Jones, the legendary Walter Jones. I don't know how this is going to go. We get up halfway, and sure enough, we start to slowly roll down the hill. So me, in my head, Survivor, right? Jump out. I jump out of the golf cart. He starts screaming, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm saving myself, man. Yeah. We're going down the hill. So ended up going down the hill. Thankfully, there was nobody coming up behind us, and it kind of plateaued, which that's not super normal on a golf course during a golf tournament.
Yeah, no. People
are flying around. You got to make your times, right? So I jumped off. Thankfully, it rolled back down, but there was a little bit of pushing that had to be done at the end. So thankfully, I don't think that happened to him during this golf course event, but he's an awesome guy and just so excited to have him. When I saw him pop up on the screen, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
For the athlete in you I got to bail, get out of here, get injured, and I just know less weight on this golf cart's the best thing right now.
That was 1,000% what went through my head. Don't get hurt doing something that wasn't lacrosse. And yeah, I wasn't going back to play for BC, so there wasn't really a problem there, but
still.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's a great bill. Well, thanks again for getting Walter for us. I mean, it was awesome talking to him. Cool to hear him talk about the offensive line and Seattle as well. I mean, great dude. And again, someone I grew up watching, and you were just like, Walter Jones. I was like, all right. I'm like, I love this. That was a sick get. So we'll leave you guys with this on this episode of The Chat. Michael Beller of The Athletic, their executive producer of their football show. We talked fantasy football. We'll leave you guys with this interview on this episode of The Chat. We'll see you guys next week. He's Michael Beller, executive producer of The Athletic's football show. Michael, thanks for joining The Chat. How are we doing today?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me, guys. Excited for week 2.
Yeah, we're excited to get into this. Week 1 in fantasy, I mean, it was, as we always like and as you always expect, excitement, a lot of volatility, and a lot of surprises. But let's looking into week 2 now. Who are guys that you are eyeing with their matchups, whether it's Thursday night or all the way to Monday night, that have good matchups that you say are must starts? And of course, outside of the guys that are the studs that you got in the early rounds of your draft.
Yeah, of course. You know what? I'll try to ease some panic. Let's start at the quarterback position. I'm still starting Joe Burrow with plenty of confidence. I don't care how he's picking up water bottles. I don't care about the flexing of the wrist. I care a little bit more about Jamar Chase not being there all summer and T. Higgins looking like he's maybe not going to play again in week 2. But I'm not really concerned about Joe Burrow either this week or in the long term. And then you couple it with what you said, the studs you take early in your draft. Chances are if you have Joe Burrow, you're not going to have another quarterback right there ready to start ahead of him. So I totally feel fine starting him. I'm not going and reaching and grabbing anyone off the waiver wire to start over Joe Burrow. Things are going to be fine in Cincinnati. Things are going to be fine with Burrow. Starting him with plenty of confidence. I like Gus Edwards also this week. The numbers obviously favored J.K. Dobbins a week ago, but Gus still got 11 carries in that game. We know what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. We know what the Chargers want to do. Big favorites here this week. They're going to run the ball plenty. I'll follow the opportunity and go with Gus Edwards, even though we have to acknowledge if one guy in that backfield is ahead right now, it's J.K. Dobbins. Those are two guys who I'm looking at who maybe people were a little concerned of with what they did in week one, who I still feel plenty of confidence, rolling with here in week two.
Yeah, I like that Gus Edwards pick because, like you said, the shares were there and the touches were there for both of them. But as you saw Gus Edwards last season with the Ravens, I mean, just a touchdown vulture, a guy that could break big runs. And with as good as this offensive line is in LA, a guy like Gus Edwards is someone you want to roll with. What about guys you're eyeing that you say, you know what? I understand why you'd want to start them, but because of a matchup or because of a situation, I'm going to sit them in week two.
Yeah, let's stick at the running back position here. Jerome Ford for the Cleveland Browns, another guy who's going to get plenty of work. But there's just a whole lot of things outside of what that offense can be that makes me just want to stay away from them entirely. I just don't have a lot of confidence in what they're going to be able to do offensively this week or really for a bit down the road here. I think there's just a lot going on with that offense that makes this a bad environment regardless of the player involved. Now, let's say we're talking about a healthy Nick Chubb. He can transcend what a situation is. Jerome Ford has some charms. He is not an A-plus Nick Chubb. And so I just don't think he is able to transcend what that Cleveland offense is right now. He is someone who I'm staying away from. Another guy who you probably took with an eye on him being a regular starter for you, who I'd be wary of here in week two, it's Calvin Ridley. We got to see a little bit more from Will Levis before we can trust Calvin Ridley as a week in, week out starter. If you went a little cheap at wide receiver, maybe he's still one of your 2-3 best options on your team. I think most Calvin Ridley fantasy managers are going to have people they can turn to who are just in better situations than he is with Will Levis. It might hurt to sit him down in week two, but I think we got to see a little bit more from Levis than what we saw against Chicago last week before we can trust maybe anyone in that passing game.
You break my heart with that Jerome Ford call as an owner of him. But, I mean, without their top two tackles, we don't know when they'll be back. The quarterback situation is absolutely terrible. And that's a really good defensive line in Jacksonville with 3 good defensive linemen, including Armstead in the middle. Michael, I understand the Jerome Ford staying away there. So, speaking of a running back in this context, I think a lot of people had that scare, that last-minute scare of Christian McCaffrey goes down, especially for the guys that picked him first overall. And if they didn't draft Jordan Mason or scoop him up right away, they're probably without a paddle right now. So what are other running back options out there that those CMC owners can get, or in this case, a Jerome Ford owner can pick up just to help weather the storm? And I'm not talking about myself, but I am, Michael. I am a little bit.
Hey, look, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been wrong plenty of times. I could be wrong again right away this week about Jerome Ford. It scares me a little bit with what's going on in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Someone who I tried to get in my leagues this week, and I unfortunately whiffed on him in both leagues where I was chasing him, was Tank Bigsby. I think you look at what Jacksonville wants to do on offense this year, and you see both he and ETN getting plenty of work in that game against Miami. Script probably had something to do with it. They got up early in that game. They were nursing a multiple score lead for a big chunk of that game. So maybe that has something to do with Tank Bigsby getting the 12 carries that he got in it. But you go back over Travis Etienne's career and you see a guy who has some explosiveness, but doesn't give you every single thing you want out of a running back. We know that they're both going to be involved. And when you get to this stage of the running back position, you know you're going to have to live with his teammate eating up some of what the backfield share is. So that's going to be true for all of these guys. Tank Bigsby, I think, has enough of a role in Jacksonville's offense and is a guy who a lot of fantasy people were very excited about a year ago. It's hard for any rookie to get acclimated to the league. So now he has that second full training camp under his belt, a role that I think Jacksonville wants to be able to bank on. Maybe doesn't always quite reach 12 carries, but I think we're looking at 8, 12, 14 opportunities for him week in and week out. And at the running back position, with the state of what it is nowadays, I think that's something that you can lean on more often than not.
Yeah, you just want at least a high floor and someone that has that touchdown opportunity. The offense is good, but I agree with you. Watching Takes Bigsby run in week 1, I mean, that's guy's downhill, that's fast, but not afraid to break runs outside and was getting some clutch touches. Staying with the running backs one more time, you speak about, you mentioned Gus Edwards, you mentioned Takes Bigsby, so those are split carries. But in a backfield of a quarterback you mentioned, in Tennessee, between Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard. Pollard broke that big run against the Bears, looked good. Is that a backfield you would approach with patience, or is that something that you've seen and go, you know what, I think Pollard is that one, and I would start him, or is that something you would stash away maybe on the bench if you don't need him to start for you?
I would want to lean in that direction, but to be honest with you, that's got a whole lot more to do with Will Levis than it has to do with Tony Pollard versus Tyjae Spears. We've seen it from Pollard, and we've seen it from Pollard in a role where he was being a complementary or at least a backfield sharing back. And so that gives me some confidence in him. We're not talking about a guy with a ton of tread on the tires. We're not talking about a guy who's getting up there into an age bracket where we start to get concerned about this position. So I feel better about him. If we're talking about him versus Spears, I would still want to find a way to get away from Tennessee's offense. But if I'm sitting here, I'm looking at Tony Pollard as one of my top 3 backs. I feel okay about it. I think we go into every week assuming he is a top 25, top 28 option at the position, and then we let things shake out from there.
I love that standout. And it makes sense, too. Like this bad quarterback play, more in the box, worse opportunities or less opportunities, I should say, to even just score a touchdown because Will Levis, I mean, that pick six was one of the worst pick sixes I've ever seen in my life. And Will Levis knew it, got down to his knees, hand on his head, like, what have I done? So speaking of quarterbacks then, and I'm not going to talk about Will Levis here, but for those Jordan Love owners, maybe those owners out there that were dependent on Kirk Cousins and saying, I like him in this system, I like him with these weapons, and then they see him looking like a statue, they can't push off his right foot. Who are quarterbacks out there that they should target to pick up, or if they have someone on their bench of, hey, these are guys I would definitely start?
Yeah, first of all, I wouldn't just necessarily be getting away from Kirk Cousins quite yet. Obviously, it's not what you want to see from him. There might be a little bit of growing pains here for him to get back to health, but I think when he is fully back, we're going to see what we thought we would get out of him for the bulk of the season. As for this week specifically, I still look at guys who are in situations who I think are going to be on the winning side of games when we get to this. And so a couple of guys who might be available who fit that, Justin Fields at the top of that list. I just think that that's going to be a situation where because of what Pittsburgh is able to do defensively, the offense is going to have opportunities. I think Bo Nix is going to have a very, very tough time with that Pittsburgh defense. So he's someone who, if you need a short-term boost for Kirk Cousins, for Jordan Love being out, I would look at him. If they win that game, gotta think Justin Fields holds on to that starting job, and I do think they go into Denver and win that game. Tough spot this week for Derek Carr going up against Dallas, but you gotta love what you saw out of this offense in week 1. It was Carolina. All the caveats that apply there certainly do apply, but Clint Kubiak was doing all sorts of wacky stuff with that offense. You had Alvin Kamara lined up out wide. You had Taysom Hill doing Taysom Hill things. You had Juwan Johnson sometimes in line, sometimes out. Rashid Shaheed lined up in the backfield. They scored 47 points, and Chris Olave has 2 catches for 11 yards. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff happening in that week 1 game for New Orleans. Don't necessarily love him this week against Dallas. If you're in a tough spot because you only had Jordan Love and no one else, I would feel okay with it. But I think Derek Carr could be someone who we look at as a totally fine week in and week out starter who has some spike weeks, like we saw in week 1.
Yeah, I love that point out. And, you could hate Derek Carr, the quarterback, but Derek Carr, the fantasy quarterback, he can throw it deep. He loves to sling it. And with the Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave on the outside, that's something you want. Looking across the entire league and all the games we have, who do you think will be the MVP of the week? And if you're not certain on, I know I'm kind of backing you a corner with that particular of a question.
It's what we do.
Who's a guy you're watching like, man, I love what he can do this week against that defense?
All right, so I'm not exactly going to be splitting the atom here, but I just think Cooper Kupp has a monster week. We saw last week what the Rams offense was still able to do without Puka Nacua and without a ton of their offensive line out there. Maybe that says something about what Detroit did in the offseason, even though we thought they made all these improvements, especially in the secondary. We'll see how Aaron Glenn's defense comes together over the next couple of weeks here. But Cooper Kupp's just going to get a ton of targets. And I think that's going to end up being one of the more fun games on the slate. Rams Cardinals. I expect a fair amount of points in that one. And I just don't see a realistic way, unless I'm totally wrong about how back and forth the scoring is, that Cooper Kupp doesn't get 14, 15 targets in this game. It's a tall order to ask of any receiver. It seems like such a layup of a number when you are as good as him and when you are so clearly the only show in town the way he is with Puka Nacua out. But if this game does go back and forth, it just feels like we're going to get back to the Cooper Kupp of a couple of years ago, the Cooper Kupp-Matthew Stafford relationship of a couple of years ago, where the guy rolled out of bed and got 10, 11 targets, let alone what we would see in a high-scoring game. So I just think we're going to be looking at something similar to last week, where he gets 15 targets, catches 12 of them for 150 and a touchdown. I think you're going to be very happy with Cooper Kupp this week.
It is fun watching him get back to that 2021 Cooper Kupp. In that same breath of that Rams receiving group, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, those were the popular names to pick up once Nacua was put on the IR. Out of those two guys, is that something wait and see, or do you see someone having a better role than the other? Well, they both had 7 targets in that Sunday night game.
Yeah, wait and see kind of kills you in fantasy. By the time you have seen, it's too late. So I don't think you can do that. I'll plant my flag on Demarcus Robinson just because we've seen what he can do with Sean McVay. We've seen what he can do in some explosive offenses. I don't think, though, that either one of them is going to rise to a level where you want to be starting them regularly unless you are in a situation where injuries, by the time the bye weeks really get here, Nacua probably back off IR, especially with the Rams having a week 6 bye, one of the earlier bye weeks in the league. It just doesn't feel like a situation where either one of them is going to rise to a level of surefire fantasy starter. Good real-life players, important real-life players for the Rams while Nacua is out. In our fantasy game, probably guys who you have just stashed on your bench in case something goes wrong with one of your regular starters.
Now, I want to pick your brain on this one, Michael, because all the experience you have in fantasy football, and the way I ask you a lot of questions, like, do you get this guy and then wait and then weather the storm? But you say, no, you can't do that because fantasy football, you got to win week to week, especially if you started out of the season with an L. What is something that's important for any fantasy football owner, strategy-wise to have when attacking waiver wires and when attacking the season week to week, to have an approach that could lead to success that you've done that's helped you?
I think you have to be aggressive. You have to trust what you just saw in the previous week and run with it. It's not just a short season for us. It's a short season for the NFL teams too. And when they have someone who has immediate success, first of all, there's probably something that was happening. If it's early in the season, it was in training camp, it was in the preseason. If we get a little bit more into midseason, maybe something that's gone on in practice, something that we on the outside don't get to see, but the coaching staff gets to see day in and day out. And that's why he got that opportunity in the first place. Secondly, what's the difference between making the playoffs and missing the playoffs in a fantasy football league? 1 win, maybe 2 wins. That's all you need. So if you can spend half of your fab, just throwing a percentage out there, and he helps you win 2 games and then is relegated to your bench after that, well, that could be what gets you in the playoffs. And then from that point forward, we let the chips fall where they do. So I think you just on the waiver wire, you have to be aggressive. You can't take those monies into next year. You can't convert them into actual dollars. So be aggressive. If you have nothing to spend in week 13, so be it. But this is the time of year where guys can make an impact for you for the entire year. And maybe it's just those 1 or 2 weeks that you really need them that ends up being the difference between getting to play deep into December and being home for your fantasy playoffs.
I think that's a great point on that one. Be aggressive. So don't listen to me. Listen to Michael Beller. I mean, that's the guy that knows in fantasy football. That's why we bring him on. Any games this weekend you really have your eye on? And that could just be the football fan. That could be someone, like you said, that Arizona Rams game, it's going to be high scoring, or someone from a fantasy perspective that you really have your focus on?
You know what? This kind of fits both of them. So I'm really excited for Lions and Bucks. First of all, Bucks gave the Lions a hell of a game in the divisional round last year. It's easy to the Lions, this close to being in the Super Bowl. It's easy to forget that they could have lost that divisional game at home to the Buccaneers. So getting them back together this early in the season with similar cast to what they had last year, that's a lot of fun. We'll talk about Clint Kubiak and that NFC South offense really getting rolling last week. Same goes for new play caller Liam Cohn in Tampa and what they were able to do. They also get a similar step up in weight class from the defense they played last week to the defense that they play this week. At least we think so. In Detroit, we know everything that Detroit can do in Jamison Williams. Getting going for them in week 1, huge for us in fantasy, huge for them in real life. There's so many little storylines on top of this being just one of the better, if not the best game on the slate in week 1. It's a 7.5-point spread, but I still think it's a fun game, even if Detroit ends up covering that. So that's one that I will definitely be watching very closely as a fantasy player and as a football fan.
Yeah, the resurgence of Baker Mayfield. And I mean, it's been a couple years now for him to get back to a Pro Bowl level quarterback, but also be a guy that you can trust on. And in these games against one of the best in the NFC, like the Lions, it's fun to watch. And I love that you pointed out the Liam Cohen hire for the Buccaneers, because when Dave Canales left, I was like, that's a great play caller. That's a good system. What does Tampa do to replace that? Liam Cohen comes from the McVay tree, similar system, similar terminology. And we see Baker and Mike Evans picked up where they left off. Last one for you, Michael. As a Badger, as a graduate of the University of Wisconsin, what are you thinking for your boy Jonathan Taylor this season as a guy that got 100% of the carries for that Colts offense?
The touchdowns maybe come down a touch just because of Anthony Richardson taking some stuff off the table. That's going to happen. We see it happen all the time with running quarterbacks, but you put those two guys in the backfield together, you get a ton of magic. And this is one of the few true running backs that we still have in the league who can do everything you ask him, who can take 100% of the carries. I think it's just another monster year for Jonathan Taylor. I wish he could send some of that up to Wisconsin, right? Send some of it back to Madison. I think it could be a tough year for the Bad, tough week coming up, right? 2 touchdown underdogs at home against Alabama. Might be a tough one with Jalen Milroe, but I think Jonathan Taylor ends up an easy top 3 fantasy back, and maybe we are talking about him at the end of this season as the best non-McCaffrey running back in the NFL.
I love that call, and I'm with you on that. Watching Tyler Van Dyke the last few weeks, it's like, Badgers, can they get it together? And we'll see that noon kickoff against Alabama in Camp Randall. I mean, it'll be packed if the students show up on time. Mike, were you a guy that got there for kickoff, or were you one of the students that trickled in by like middle of the first, beginning of the second quarter?
Depends on the game, depends on the week, depends on what happened on Friday night. We can leave it at that.
Hey, I love it. He's Michael Beller, executive producer of the Athletic Football Show, graduate of the University of Wisconsin. Michael, appreciate you helping out with all these fantasy football questions and helping out us owners navigate week to week and get a win week to week.
You got it. Thanks for having me.